Hello and welcome to this video. I was leaning over there when I started. Did I notice that? I was leaning over. You shouldn't be leaning over to start a video. It's not the way, no way to start a video. On this video, I'm going to be going through the 10 greatest double albums of all time. No live albums in brackets, just studio albums. And why have I done this? I'll tell you why I've done this. Because when I'm doing a lot of these top 10 videos, you come across albums, they're double albums, and people think they're great. But I don't like them, and a lot of people have said, you never like a double album, don't you? It's like London Calling, I don't like that album. If I think a single album, I wouldn't single it out. You know, I'm singling it out because it's a double album. I think that makes sense. There's too much waffle on it, they didn't pull it off. Okay? Blonde on Blonde, I hate that album. If it had been a single album, I'd probably still hate it. Bloody hell, there's this new Dylan film out, and I just went to get some biscuits from the shop, and I couldn't believe they actually were playing Bob Dylan like a Rolling Stone. It's one of his greatest songs, recorded in 1965. It basically creates that sort of folk rock sound. It's so groundbreaking that Like a Rolling Stone doesn't sound like a 65. It sounds like 75 almost. I can hear how ahead of its time it is. But it's bloody awful, isn't it? Absolute horrible listen. And I did what I always do in Dylan. I thought, oh, it's supposed to be the lyrics, and I thought, a complete unknown, with no direction home like a Rolling Stone. I thought, it doesn't sound that good to me. And I know where I'm going. I'm going to my studio. You can't say that to me, that I'm a complete unknown. Who do you think you are? I've got a direction home. I've got sat nav. Anyway, Exile on Main Street, another one. You know, I wouldn't be singling that one out and say how bad it was, but everyone says it's amazing. People think it's amazing because it's a double album, because they think it's a great not proclamation, it's a great statement. Unless you're a progressive rock band, then it is a proclamation of intent. Now, what's interesting here is this one. I'm going to go through 10 that I actually think are great double albums that aren't full of fluff, because that's the main problem you have. But I'm also going to do a video at another point on the big four flawed double albums. Now, I'm going to tell you what they are, because they're not going to be on this list. I think the big four flawed double albums, right? And these are albums that I do like, and I think they're great, but I think they're flawed for being double albums, would be The Wall by Pink Floyd, would be Tales from Topographic Oceans by Yes, would be Lamb Lies Down on Broadway by Genesis, and then Physical Graffiti by Led Zeppelin. They're great albums, but I think they're flawed. They're a bit too long. And then we've got just, everyone thinks they're great, but they're crap. And that would be Exile on Main Street, London Calling, Blonde on Blonde. And I'm toying with discussing Trap Mass Replica. I love B-Fart, and I do really love Trap Mass Replica, but I really do think that album, even if it was a single album, would not be that strong when compared to Safe as Milk or Bat Chain Puller or Lick My Decals. All of those albums are greater. And in relative to what he did, I just don't think the statement's strong enough. I think there's too much guff. Now, that's another video, that is. But I have actually come up with 4 albums that are quite surprising when you actually start going through it, which I think are really great. And I'm going to run through them now. And I'm going to try and make this quite a short video. So I'm just going to tell you the name of the album. I'm going to tell you why I think it is great. And that's all I have to do, isn't it? That's the nature of, I'm explaining what I do here. I don't normally do that. Normally I just do it without explaining it. Should we just get on with it? Yeah, let's get on with it. You have tread water long enough. So at number 10, I have, let's write down at number 10, because I know this is going to upset everybody. But I do have at number 10, Blood Sugar Sex Magic by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I think it's an amazing album. Absolutely stunning. Right, Red Hot Chili Peppers. In the 1980s, I can remember sat there with my mum and dad watching Tough Guys, which was a film that had Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas. So they were a bit old then, and they were these old tough guys. So they decided to become tough guys again. They decided to go out to a club, and of course in their sort of gangster time, it's all, would have been like Goodfellas, all Jewish comedians and cool jazz groups and all that. But they go out and they go to this club, and it's the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I never heard of them. And what's funny is I can remember, I think Burt Lancaster turns around to Kirk Douglas, he goes, who's the hell's this? He goes, it's the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And it stuck in my mind because these guys that were leaping about, wearing big furry hats and being all funky and punky, I thought, well, this sounds really good. It's, why is this made-up band better than proper bands? But they weren't made up. They were a band in Los Angeles at that time. I didn't know. Then, around about when Uplift Mofo Party Plan came out, they came to the UK. And my mate said, do you want to come and see him? And I went, no, I've never heard of him. He went to see them. Came back and he was just blown away, and he said, "Well, they were made because they were doing all the naked thing and he was doing the cartwheels and it was all funk and slap bass." And they said, "You would have loved it, Andy." So I can remember the next day I went downtown and I was in the record shop and I was about to buy. It could have been a John Patitucci album, so I'm holding this John Patitucci album, which I did eventually buy. But I looked at this Red Hot Chili Peppers album. Now it could be Uplift Mofo, but I'm actually thinking there's some time had passed, and it was, in fact, Mother's Milk. So this would have put it a bit later for me. And I thought, oh, come on, Andy, live dangerously. So I didn't buy the Patitucci album. I bought Mother's Milk. And for me, who'd become a bit of a sort of jazz snob and listened to a lot of sort of middle-of-the-road jazz at that point, a lot of GRP stuff, it was a bit of fresh air for me. I loved it. And so I became a big fan of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I was listening to all the time. I started, didn't get to see them live, but I bought videos by them, bought all the back catalogue. So now I've got everything up to Mother's Milk. And then they announced this album, Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic. By this time, I'm a massive Red Hot Chili Peppers fan. So I go down to the shop the morning it's released. I go in and I buy it and take it home. And I can remember putting it on, and that bit at the beginning when it kicks in and it's all thin, like it sounds like there's no bass speakers in it, and it goes boom, 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 and then the bass goes do, and then he kicks in and he is rapping, full out rapping. He's sort of done this before, but it's as though he's got good at it at this point. And way before Rage Against the Machine, way before Korn, he's doing this sort of rap rock funky thing. And as the thing progresses, it just never lets up. And when you get tired of this, they go off into things like Breaking the Girl. It's just an incredible album. And the Red Hot Chili Peppers, I think nobody remembers how absolutely great they were at this point. And in amongst all this incredibly frenetic, wild, funky rock, slap bass madness, they would do tracks like Under the Bridge, which really were emotive tracks. It was as though Anthony Kiedis has actually found a sort of songwriting approach which fitted into their sort of lads aesthetic, but had some gravitas to it because, of course, they'd gone through all this horrendous stuff and their guitarist Hillel Slovak had died. I remember thinking this is one of the greatest albums ever made, and I still do think it. And if I put that on, double album, it flybys to me all the way through. Towards the end, they get sort of more offensive and actually sort of more epic as well. And they sort of go deeper and deeper into this aesthetic that they've got. This album, surprisingly being a double album, with the tracks Give It Away and then Under the Bridge, spins them into sort of huge success. They go from being a cult band to be one of the biggest bands in the world. Under the Bridge becomes a big MTV staple. John Frusciante can't take it, who is such an incredible musician and a very interesting person. Can't take it, he's out. They bring in Dave Navarro and they do One Hot Minute. And I think One Hot Minute is a fantastic album. In fact, I nearly put it on my greatest of 1995, but I thought it was going to be a hard sell. And I had other ones I wanted to put on. After that point, it's as though they signed the deal with the devil and they become like one of the sort of, like a funky Coldplay almost. And they still do brilliant tracks. I went to see them live a few years ago. They were absolutely brilliant. And the thing I loved about them was that in between the tracks, they would just jam and be sat in a sort of 20,000-seater arena watching people jam and do bits of Jaco Pastorius or bits of Zappa and thinking, oh my God, this is incredible. Mainstream band doing this stuff. They're great. So that's what I've got at number 10. It's Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic. Put it on. It's brilliantly recorded, produced by Rick Rubin. It just burns from beginning to end. Incredible drum sound. Really catchy raps with great choruses. It's everything you'd want from an album. Right, at number 9, I have Sign of the Times by Prince. Sign of the Times, which is a double album. All these are double albums, but I'll still tell you every single time as though you don't know it. Sign of the Times is Prince's greatest album. So, Prince, It's funny, since Prince died, he's been turned into this sort of saint-stroke genius, and everyone has to say how great he was. That wasn't the case. In the old days, he was seen as a bit of a sort of another Michael Jackson, and he was irritating. He used to irritate people. And the reason he irritated people is because it's quite sexual what he did. He'd walk around in his pants on. He had like makeup on. He was little, and he seemed to be cocky. I don't know. I think talented people rub people up the wrong way. I was very aware that this guy could play all the instruments, was a good guitarist, but a great drummer, great bass player. I love his bass playing. Incredible singer and a brilliant songwriter. And his songwriting was proved that he was not only having hits for himself, but with, Nothing Compares to You, Sinead O'Connor, I Feel For You, by Chaka Khan, Manic Mondays by the Bangles. He was giving everyone else. This guy's an incredible talent. Now, the first album I love, which is sort of his Stevie Wonder album, is playing all the instruments on it, very funky. And then the 80s come along and he creates this sort of dirty electro funk sound, which just seems to sort of come out. It's the next thing on from Rick James. It's all right. It's not my cup of tea, but I like it. Then he makes a film, Purple Rain. He brings a soundtrack album out. The film is so overindulgent and cheesy, and yet it's a huge commercial success. He is sent to superstardom not by an album, by a film. Everyone goes to watch this film. Every track off this album goes to number one. I went and bought Purple Rain, which regularly comes up in the top 20 albums of all time, and is by Prince, who I absolutely love. And I don't like Purple Rain. After Purple Rain, he finds a sort of this psychedelic sound. He brings out Parade, and Parade, I was sort of quite interested in Prince because I saw Purple Rain, and I like the fact that when you watch it, the liveness of that and the story. There is something good about that film, although it's cheesy. When Parade came out, I remember I heard some of the tracks on the radio, and I was, oh my god, this guy's a proper genius. It was Parade that got me. Now, I believe Parade that was before Sign of the Times. So Sign of the Times, he brings out this concert film, he brings out this double album, and this concert film is a live concert, but there's slight dramatic bits in. There's certain points where it seems set up. I don't know whether the Sign of the Times is actually a live gig or not. Never been able to work it out. But this album, although it's a studio album, is programmed like a 2-hour Prince live show, and that's why it works. And with the opening track, Sign of the Times, there's a new aesthetic, and it's very rare with R&B, soul, funk musicians that they can get into this sort of profound area. I think Gil Scott-Heron does it with Winter in America. Stevie Wonder can do it with his eyes shut. Or his eyes open. I didn't mean to crack that joke. What am I supposed to say now? Just get on with it. Forget you said that. And Sign of the Times is funky and it's sparse and it is electro funk. So it's got that thing like Word Up, which is the greatest example of electro funk ever. Zappa, there would be another example of it. I do love it. Herbie Hancock, Rocket. But Prince is profound at this point. And this album, it just never lets up. And again, it's very funky. It kicks all the way through. It has the ballads just in the right place. And it does build towards the epic. I'm not talking about a sideline track, but it's building to much more involved tracks. But these are involved in a sort of black rhythm and blues review thing. So these tracks open up and get bigger and bigger. So I think most people feel that Sign of the Times is his greatest album. One of the problems I have with Prince at this point is that then he brings out Love Sexy, he brings out the Black Album, which I got as well on bootleg. And everyone seems to think that Love Sexy is not quite as good as this album, which it is. It's incredible. His run of albums are really brilliant at this point. Once he gets to the early 90s, and he gets all that thing of becoming, Symbol and problems with the record company, he does seem to lose quality at this point. And my favourite album of that period is Come, which is almost like a jazz fusion album. But it's in nowhere near the sort of profundity of Sign of the Times, number 9. Right, we're 15 minutes in, I've got through 2. At number 8, I have Sing to God by Cardiacs, which came out in 1995. Cardiacs are sort of a band that occupy their own world in music. Not that well known, hidden from public view, fronted by the great Tim Smith, who wrote these mad songs that seem to be this sort of insane, surreal English take on all the styles of music together all at once. Cardiacs are one of the most incredible bands in history. They sort of emerged late 70s, start bringing stuff out on cassettes. By the late 80s, they have a deal. They actually have a hit with a single. But their albums are complex, difficult, but full of such invention, incredible composition, funniness, quirkiness, and incredible vocal hooks. In 1995, the sort of lineup changes and they bring in John Paul, the great John Paul, in on guitar. It's a different lineup going on. They get into the studio and they make this double album. And now, I've got to be honest, I have never been able to sit through this album all the way through. So this one does not fulfill my criteria for being on this list. This is too much. If I put it on, if I can get to the end of disc 1, I am completely exhausted. Then I have to go and listen to disc 2 about a week later. This is so intense. It's so in your face. It's so inventive. There's so much going on that it stands as this huge document of genius, like raw genius that is like the sun. You can get too close to it. Somewhere buried inside 2 of the first discs, somewhere in there, is a track called Dirty Boy, which is, for me, is Cardiac's finest moment. It is probably the ultimate combination of the sacred and the profane. It seems to be an ode to onanism, but at the same time, it's like ascending to heaven. It's an incredible track, and it made my 10 greatest songs of all time. This is a mighty album. Yep, you're going to have difficulty getting all the way through it if you listen to it. It's too intense. It will be a lot for many people to take, but this is a really incredible album. At number 7, right, I sat there, I thought all these prog bands in the 70s, they're all trying to do, they have their big album, don't they? So if you have your Close to the Edge, and you think, well, where can we go from here? It's got to be a double album. And they try it, and they fail. Genesis, they do Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. They try it and they fail. Now, I know the prog fans are going to be sat here because there's such hardcore prog fans going, they didn't fail. Topographic Oceans is Yes's best album. Lamb is Yes's best album. And in a way, I do agree with what you're saying. Hear me out on this. I haven't finished with this one yet. ELP, Brain Salad Surgery, monumental, works. You see what I'm saying? They all sort of do it. It's a bridge too far, right? Now, if you are a hardcore Yes fan, I assure you, when you put on Topographic Oceans, you're so into it that all the meandery rubbish bits you like because you just love it. You'll like whatever they do. That's the truth, isn't it? Come on, admit it. The Wall, it sags. Pink Floyd, it sags. They made a number of double albums. They all bloody sag. Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, that's better. I think that, so you can see I'm being objective here. Lamb Lies Down on Broadway holds together better than Topographic Oceans. And yet, somewhere around the sort of side 3, it sags. I think you could do great music, sequencing over 4 sides, and it's going to sag because it requires a genius to lift it up above that. And what that genius is, I think this could well be the problem, is you've got to go somewhere else to keep the listener interested. Frank Zappa was able to put together brilliant double albums like The Cows Come Home, and you're going to ask yourself that there's none on here, I don't think. Have I got a Zappa album? And the reason is I thought there's no point in including him, and if I do, because all these albums contain live elements, I'm going to get it in the neck from the sort of anal retard element of this viewership. So I didn't put any of them on, but if you take something like Joe's Garage by Frank Zappa, which is a triple album, believe it or not, there is an arc where he goes somewhere else. Literally, the second double album is in a different place of the first album. And it is this opening out. It has to open out and get grander and grander. And you can't do that if you're trying to stick to a formula like Yes, where you're going to have a sidelong epic, a sidelong epic, a sidelong epic, and a sidelong epic, all based upon some weird yogi's thoughts. You know, I mean, it's hard to keep that going. And when they do go off, they're going off on sort of self-indulgent tangents and sort of soloing spots and endless Steve House sort of slide guitar playing and drum solos and all this type of stuff. Which, if you're into it, you're into it. Now, there is only one progressive rock band of the classic period at the classic time that I think produced a flawless double album, and it's Focus with Focus 3. I think Focus 3, Moving Waves or Focus 3, that people are going to argue that they're the best ones. And the thing with Focus 3, it is just so varied because it's not conceptual. It presents all these different aspects. And the other thing with Focus is, unlike Yes and Genesis, they are as much a jazz rock fusion band as they are a prog band. And so they can bring in elements of improvisation. And they're very, very strong and good. You know, Jan Akkerman is such a strong guitar player that he's able to come out and make statements, because you cannot fill your album up with meandery solos if your soloists are meandery. And in a lot of cases with the progressive rock bands, these musicians are very good at playing written material that they have created. But when it comes to soloing, they don't quite have that sort of ability. It's very rare that you get someone who has both of those abilities. Focus, I think they do that. They are jammers. They also write brilliant tunes. And here we get a number of epics, we get a number of very short tracks, and we have a hit, don't we? Because this is the one that's got Sylvia on. So, yeah, Focus 3 is absolutely... It's a wonderful double album, and I think even above Moving Waves, there's a sophistication in Focus's playing which develops as time goes on. And I've always felt that Moving Waves is a little bit underproduced, maybe, and a little bit sort of Larry in the playing, a little bit 70s outlandish, even for me. With Focus, it's much more tied down. You know, they've had a big hit record. The record company are investing in them, and there's something absolutely solid and focused, and they pull it off. Focus, one of the great progressive rock bands of the 70s, and I don't talk about them enough. Right, at number 6, I have... Oh, this could be number 1. At number 6, I have Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds. Now, that's a progressive rock double album, and it's conceptual. What makes... I mean, War of the Worlds by Jeff Wayne is just bloody brilliant. It's a bit cheesy. I know it's a bit cheesy. I heard it when I was like probably 10, 11 years old. I couldn't believe it when my dad brought this home. You know, this was before VHS. This is before videos. You know, we had the telly. And that went off in the daytime. You know, so you had your little telly and you could watch that, Scooby-Doo. But in the daytime, you were bored. And then Jeff Wayne brings us this album. It's got a great big booking with pictures. And you put it on, and you could actually follow the story. It's got Richard Burton narrating it. He's telling you the story, so you sit there, and you want to know the story, and it's bloody War of the Worlds, which is a brilliant story, and you got the illustrations. And then it's prog. This is full-on prog. But there's a full orchestra on there. Shun, shun, shun. Shun, shun, shun. Absolutely, I was singing... Run to the Hills, wasn't I? Run to the Hills sounds very much like... The opening of Run to the Hills sounds very much like the string riff from War of the Worlds. Has anyone else noticed this? I wonder if I made and nicked it off War of the Worlds. The timing's exactly when it would have happened. All these incredible players. Phil Lynott comes on there. You've got like... it's just a brilliant album. And the great thing about this album, comes out in 78, right? Prog's dead, hasn't it? Pug's come along and killed Prog dead. Not here in the UK, it hasn't. 12 million albums he's going to sell with this. Bang, War of the Worlds, out it comes, right? And the reason is because it's as much a disco album as it is a prog album. It's disco prog. Disco prog. I mean, disco prog. I mean, I could do the 10 greatest disco prog albums of all time. All the other ones will be rubbish. They really will. I can't even think who they might be. Except for War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds is bloody brilliant. It's a miracle what Jeff Wayne pulls off on that album. Double album, it's incredible. Incredible. Some brilliant songs as well. Forever Autumn. Justin Hayward, just absolutely beautiful. Just comes out of the middle of nowhere. One of the great songs. It's the composition. It's well written. Jeff Wayne is able to take on a composition of this type and pull it off. Whereas like a lot of the progressive rock bands, which are basically bands in the room playing together and not composers, they're sort of pulling the songs together out of their sound and them jamming, which is how Genesis wrote, and this is how Yes wrote. I don't know how ELP wrote. I think they could have well had these sort of compositions brought in by Keith Emerson, say, but I don't know. But the point here is that maybe those bands just didn't quite have the compositional chops to pull off the grand scheme, because you have to be able to sit back to do that. It's very interesting when we look at double albums. So that's at number 6. I've got War of the Worlds. Number 5. Oh, I have got a Zappa album on here. I have put one on. I've just seen it. It's at number 4, and there may be some live elements. Well, I'll deal with that when we get there. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Because at number 5, I've got Electric Ladyland by Jimi Hendrix. Jimi. The more I do this channel, the more I think Jimmy's the greatest rock musician that's ever lived. Ever. He was just incredible on every single level. A brilliant songwriter, an absolutely brilliant songwriter, a brilliant lyricist, and obviously an incredible guitar player that just changed the face of guitar. A charismatic, person, probably the greatest frontman of a band in history. And it's surprising because he seemed to be such a shy guy, but he wasn't on stage. A brilliant composer, an incredible producer. And when he signs in 1967, he's on fire. And in 3 years, up until 1970, September 70, I think it was when he died, he produces enough stuff to have, like, how many 20 albums is there out there now? Million live albums. How many live DVDs or live concerts on footage can you see? This guy was producing genius level stuff all the time. Now, when I was a kid, I can remember I saw Jimi Hendrix on the TV and I thought he was amazing. But I remember thinking that some of the live stuff that they were churning out, and you've seen a lot, I thought he's out of tune there, and he's a bit all over the place there. But that's really, really good. And I didn't quite get it because some of the footage I was seeing was from Monterey, which is far more about the performance of him just coming out. When he does Killing Floor, and you see he goes with that guitar solo, and he hits that bum note, and me as a kid will go, he hit a bum note there. Of course he didn't hit a bum note. And it's like when he goes to the Wild Thing, his guitar's out of tune. All that sounded a bit off for me. But I still loved it. I loved Hendrix. So I went out and bought, it was an album called Stone Free, which was lots of different things. I had all along the Watchtower. And suddenly I heard him in the studio, and it's a completely different thing. And I think if we look at the trajectory of Hendrix while he was alive, the albums that came out when he was live, I Experience incredible, but it sounds like guys in a room playing. Not all the time. In the title track, I Experience is pretty out there. Then you get Axis Bold of Love, funkier sound, more psychedelic, but still within the confines of a single album and a band in the room. When he gets to Electric Ladyland, this is a sprawling epic, and it's so great that nobody ever mentions that on this album he basically invents prog, jazz rock fusion, heavy metal. He does the whole idea. He invented heavy metal before with Purple Haze. He just does everything on this album. There's sidelong epics, there's mad psychedelic jams, there's catchy stuff, there's slow blues. It's just unbelievable. Electric Ladyland is absolutely incredible. He then carries on. He's when he dies at the end of 70, that year he was working on new material, and this is the material that then fills up all these albums like Loose Ends and War Heroes and all these albums that came out, under Alan Douglas, all that type of stuff. I've done a whole video. I really get into depth with Hendrix, and I try and nail some of these recordings. And after I did that video, I suddenly got an idea, and I could actually see, oh my God, Hendrix did this then, and all the live footage you see is in 1 year. I think it's 69, and all these extra tracks that are on the albums, they were all made in 1970. And then he's making Electric Ladyland, I think, in 68, and he's out there becoming Jimi Hendrix in 67. It's like the amount of stuff he packs in. And I think we don't appreciate it. Forget any Beatles album. Although I've got a Beatles album at number 2. But forget the Beatles, really. I mean, have I gone wrong here in putting Electric Lady? Have I done? And now I'm talking about it. Is Electric Ladyland, is it truly the greatest? I think it should be at number one. I think I've underestimated it. Shall we sit that there? Right, you stay there then. Okay? I know you seem all sad with yourself, Electric Ladyland. You know, it's your own fault for having all the bare ladies on the front. It's just totally taken away from what's inside. You know, that's how anyone ever thinks about when they think of this album. Now nobody wants to mention it because it's all this Me Too stuff. Think what the hell's Jimi Hendrix doing, bringing all these ladies in with nothing on? So it's your own fault, really, for not getting number one. And I'm trying to help you. You sit there, and we'll see when we get through. I might do a switcheroo when I get to the end. Just hold your horses, will you? So we move on. So apparently, better than Electric Ladyland at number 4 is You Are What You Is by Frank Zappa. Now, Uncle Meat, Shake Your Booty, Them or Us, all incredible double albums, all containing quite a lot of live material in there. I would say that one of the most concise albums by Frank Zappa, one of the sort of catchiest, and yet he does all the stuff that you'd expect from Frank Zappa. One of, you know, like a Zappa album that you could buy and you go, that's your first Zappa album. Would be You Are What You Is. Now, it never lets up. And now, the reason it doesn't let up is because Zappa's programming absolutely brilliantly. This album comes from 1981. It's when he had one of his most virtuoso bands, including Stevie on stunt guitar. It has the drummer Dave Logerman, who is not Vinnie Colaiuta and he's not Chad Wackerman, but has a very funky and tight style. I absolutely love Dave Logerman's drumming on You Are What This Is. It's a shame he didn't really crop up. I think he's on Tinseltown Rebellion on one track as well. So the band's very virtuoso. There's a lot of singers. We've got Ike Willis, we've got Ray White, so there's a ton of vocal harmonies, and Zappa integrates the vocal harmonies really into his compositional style, and so this is actually quite accessible. It opens up with Teenage Wind, which is his response to, is it Christopher Cross's Ride Like the Wind? You know that track? And the reason is because, and this is what Zappa does, you see. Zappa could have written hit records, but he wasn't interested in doing it. And so I think Adrian Belew at the time was friends with Christopher Cross. They'd known each other from school, and he comes in today and says, I can't believe this, Frank, my friend from school's had this massive hit record. And he goes, what with? He goes, you know, Ride Like the Wind. And he goes, oh, really? He listens to it. He goes, oh, I can write that. And then he just sat down and wrote Teenage Wind. And it's very, very catchy. And on side one, you get this sort of pastiche of different sort of hit records. There's the Doreen, which is a sort of that sort of Midwestern rock type thing. You've got like a country song on there. And then at the end of that side, you have a piece called, it's called Sinister Footwear Part 1. Sinister Footwear Part 2 is on Them or Us. And this is basically a Frank Zappa solo. Now, this bit could well be live. I'm not too sure. But it doesn't sound live. It sounds entirely studio. There's no like clapping at the end of any of this that you get on things like Them or Us that give the game away. And Zappa's doing a guitar solo. And the guitar solo is being doubled by Steve Vai on guitar and Ed Mann on glockenspiel or something. It's a ridiculous display of virtuosity. So you have these sort of very quite accessible pop songs and then this slice of Zappa improvisation and composition on side one. Side two is this incredible sort of, it's a number of different tracks, but it creates a suite which is about, it's about sort of chatting, you know, it's about people going out and chatting each other up and, you know, getting it together, and it sort of critiques that. Wonderful. Side three opens up with You Are What You Is and ends up with Dumb All Over. So that's completely different. And then at the end we get I Don't Want to Get Drafted and all that type of stuff. And what I'm trying to explain, I won't go through it all because I'll be here for hours. Each side is its own little world, but it is all homogenous and it's got this very tight sound to it. It's one of my favourite Zappa albums. It's beautifully recorded, beautifully produced. It's very, very funny. It's very offensive in places, which is what we want. It does everything that you'd want from a Zappa album. And Zappa, if anyone knows how to program a double album, is Frank Zappa. And I think the fact that he has sort of a collage approach to creating albums, he is able to sit back and create this. He's really into Calder mobiles, which are those things that hang from the roof. They were really popular in the 70s, and they'd have a big lump here and then a great big long arm here. So he saw that you could balance this big lump here with this great big long arm here. And I think Zappa does think quite architecturally when he's in a rock situation. I think actually when he goes to try to write orchestral music, it doesn't work so well. But I think in a rock band and having everything at his disposal, all the different things that he can bring in, he pulls it off. So that's what I got at number 4, is You Are What You Use. Absolutely brilliant album. At number 3, I have an album that changed my life. It's by Miles Davis. It's called Bitches Brew. It was recorded in 1969, came out in 69, 1970. It can be seen as sort of the beginning of jazz rock fusion, although it's more than just a straight jazz rock fusion album. On this album, Miles Davis brought together the greatest young musicians at that time and into a huge band with 2, sometimes 3 drummers, 2 electric bass players, a bass clarinet and saxophone. And at the centre of it all, his trumpet, Wayne Shorter's incredible soprano sax, and John McLaughlin's electric guitar. Bitches Brew, when I read about it as a kid and I looked at the lineup, which off the top of my head would be Miles Davis on trumpet, Wayne Shorter on soprano sax, Bernie Maupin on bass clarinet, Jimi Santos, I think, or is it on percussion, maybe, Lenny White on drums, Jack DeJohnette on drums, and Don Elias on drums, I think. And Billy Cobbs at some of these sessions, but not on any of the sessions that went towards the album Bitches Brew. John McLaughlin on electric guitar, Dave Holland on acoustic bass, Harvey Brooks from Bob Dylan's band on electric bass. I think I've got through it. It's almost what you've got here are 2 bands. It's a little bit like what Ornette Coleman did with Prime Time. And Zappa, Miles, it's called Directions in Music. He stands over this sort of congregation of musicians, but rather than it being, it's more voodoo than it is Pentecostal Christianity. It's dark. And Miles Davis is in the centre of it. And Miles' sound is so powerful that even with all these virtual... Joe Zawin on electric piano, Chick Corea on electric piano, and Larry Young on electric piano and organ, maybe. There we go. I knew I'd missed them out. It's all up there somewhere. And those 3 electric pianos create this sort of twilight effect across the whole thing. It's absolutely incredible. But Miles Davis is at the centre of it, and he seems separate from all the other musicians. And then he literally takes these musicians and he puts them in there and they just improvise. And then the structure's created by the producer Tio Macero, I never know how to say his name, and he basically cuts this together. This approach is basically how music's made now. Now you get on a computer and you'd start you'd get a drum loop, go, we'll have that 4-bar drum loop, we'll put that there, let's repeat that again. And this manoeuvring around of stuff to create the structure is absolutely groundbreaking at this point. Bitches Brew is a difficult album to listen to. The title track, Bitches Brew, is nearly half an hour long. Pharaoh's Dance is well over 20, 25 minutes long. Spanish Key is like 15 minutes long. Miles on the Voodoo Down is 15 minutes long. And then there's 2 short tracks, Sanctuary, which is actually them playing through, I think it's I Fall in Love Too Easily, maybe. It's a jazz standard, which they've abstracted. And then what sounds like a jam, which is a John McLaughlin just letting loose on electric guitar, and that track's called John McLaughlin. I've talked about this so many times before. I've got a whole video on Bitches Brew, so you can go and check that out. But it's a flawless album. Is it greater than Electric Ladyland? I don't know. Let's deal with that when we get to the end of the video. Right, so at number 2, I have the White Album by the Beatles. The Beatles were a tight little Liverpudlian band playing their sort of British version of rhythm and blues. Cheeky rhythm and blues. That's what they were doing. Cheeky lads playing rhythm and blues. So the combination of British cheekiness and kicking American rhythm and blues is the sound that creates rock music in the early 60s. But the point is, they're a killer band. I did a video where I went through all the albums, and it was very interesting to actually sit down and listen to the Beatles albums in order, one after the other. And the reason I did, because so many Beatles albums I've never actually sat down and listened to. And there's an arc. The first album, they basically have, was it 12 hours to make it? They go in and just a live gig that George Martin recorded. That's the first album, Changes the World. And then they go into the studio, and their trajectory is basically discovering what the recording studio will do, alongside rock and roll turning into rock music and becoming sophisticated and yet still popular. And the Beatles define sophisticated but still popular. And they start to experiment with the studio. They start to experiment with the fact that George Martin's is like a classical arranger, so they can bring in string quartets, they could bring in Handel type classical trumpet. They start to bring in all these different aspects of session musicians. They start to weave this in. And George Martin, before this, he'd worked on comedy records for like the Goons and Peter Sellers. I had these albums growing up. And so he'd had to create this structure using the studio of bringing in spoken word, and, you might have a brass band appear at certain points. And he brings this approach, which really is like the Goons, into the Beatles, and it starts to expand. And there's this arc. Towards the end, when the band is really gone past its sell-by date, and I'm going to talk about this here, I think, a little bit. There's a certain point where the band needed to break up, and they kept going because they were the biggest band in the world, and there was too much riding on it. So they go a little bit too far, and they end up trying to patch things up in the studio, making the album Let It Be, which is interesting because it's back to them just playing in together. Now, this arc of going from just a great band in the studio to a great band in the studio, that arc in the middle is this studio experimentation. The White Album is almost like the peak of studio experimentation. It does not sound like a band. It sounds like people going mad with a 4-track. It's lots of different stuff. There's lots of tape effects, sounds. You've got Revolution Number 9 and all that sort of mad experimentation going on here. It's a brilliant album, and it has to be a double album because this is the point where the Beatles are really experimenting and really discovering what the studio is going on. But also, it's the point where this studio experimentation is allowing each member to go their own way. Because once you don't have to be in the room to play with each other anymore, you then can go off and do your thing, and you can go off and do your thing, and you can be here, and you can make recordings. It doesn't matter if Paul McCartney's not here, doesn't matter if Lennon's not here. Ringo's always there. This is why the band lasted, because Ringo would sit there, he's got his cup of tea, he's got his biscuits, he's got a little table there, and he sat there waiting. They might have gone off around the shops, but he's ready to go, and as soon as they're ready to go, he's on it, and he's doing it. The White Album has to be that long, and it documents this incredible explosion of creativity in the recording studio, but it also documents the point, I think, where the Beatles no longer really want to be together. 1967 is that year. Now, we've discussed Jimi Hendrix. I have a theory, and I haven't heard anyone else say this, but the Beatles were top dogs. They couldn't be beaten. 67, Pink Floyd go in. They're in the same time doing Sgt. Pepper, right, which comes after. But in 67, Jimi Hendrix emerges. And what Jimi does makes the Beatles sound a little bit passé. And I think the Beatles are then thinking, what do we do? And Paul McCartney's got this idea of what he wants. John Lennon's got his idea. George Harrison's very quiet, but he's got his idea. And they start to go in different directions. And I think John Lennon wants to be the rocker, and that's what he wants to do. Whereas Paul McCartney wants to become this sort of English composer of almost like novelty songs in a way, but heavy novelty songs drawing on sort of Music Hall and the Goons. And this tension really, it's like if you have that tension, when they get to their final album, which is their greatest album, Abbey Road is their greatest album, I think. But once you get to Abbey Road is flawed, massively flawed by Maxwell's Silver Hammer. And in that, all the poison that existed at that time in the band is contained within that track. And it's a decent track, but that seems to soak it up. That's my take on the Beatles at this period. And it enables, Abbey Road, the big sort of medley at the end is brilliant. The Beatles pull it off, but you can see they're not able to quite finish what they're doing. The White Album's not like that. It's genius all the way through. It's the beginning of the end, though, isn't it? Or is it the end of the beginning? Or is it the end of the end? No, it's not the end of the end. What did Churchill say? Paraphrasing him. That's what I got at number 2. So what have I got at number 1? I've got an album which is perfect in every way, and you couldn't imagine it not being a double album. And it's by Stevie Wonder, and it's called Songs in the Key of Life. And this takes you on a journey. Stevie Wonder is on a run at that point through, Inner Visions and Talking Book and Music of the Mind, of just making one genius album after another. He, again, is like the Beatles times 10, because he has discovered the recording studio, but Stevie Wonder could play everything himself. And this idea of just letting Stevie free, put him into a recording studio and off he goes. He can do it all with his eyes shut. Stevie Wonder can. He's just in there. Here he is. Show me where the Moog is. Or Moog, or however you say it. I didn't even know how to say it. I didn't even know what it looks like. And he takes him over, they plays a Moog, puts a bass line down, gets on the drums, puts the drums down, puts a vocal down, puts some clavinet down. He's like this. It's just genius. Inner Visions is like that. It's just like, oh my God, musical genius. Every song is like a bloody number 1. And that's what you've got going on with Songs in the Key of Life. Too many brilliant tracks on here to go into. I Wish, Sir Duke. I was going to say Gangster's Paradise. That's why I went quiet, because it's not Gangster's Paradise. I can't remember what it is. It's another Paradise that Stevie Wonder came up with, and then later on, the late great Celio, he died, didn't he? He does the Gangster's Paradise. This is a very good explanation of your number 1. Let's get on to what it's really about. Stevie Wonder is a product of the Motown system. He's signed as a child. He's a child prodigy. They actually don't know what to do with him in the early days. When you listen to those early albums, he's not even singing. They see him as just this blind kid that can play all the instruments, and it's like it's like, oh, it's a novelty. And he does all sorts of different Christmas albums, cover versions. He's not even writing his own songs. He's not singing. So this eventually emerges, and by the time he starts making proper Stevie Wonder albums where he's writing the songs and singing, he's made all these different albums, and you go back and listen to him. You don't know any of the songs so he's been around. He has come up in this period of rock and roll and rock music through the 60s. And he's incredibly talented. It's almost like he is the product of American black music. He is everything in there personified. He's part Ray Charles. He's part James Brown. He's part Diana Ross. He's part Duke Ellington. He personifies it all. There's a video somewhere on the net where Stevie Wonder's on piano and he's jamming with Stanley Clarke, and they're playing Giant Steps, and he gets to the solo and he just sits there and plays through Giant Steps, because Stevie Wonder is a jazz musician. And as the jazz fusion thing's happening, what nobody realises is that Stevie Wonder is basically just jazz fusion with vocals. There's a track on this called Contusion. It is jazz rock fusion. And what he does by drawing on that, because he loves it, and he's listening to Weather Report and Zawinul, and he's name-checking them, and he's bringing these players in, and because he's drawing upon that and also pioneering it, in a way, he lays the groundwork for a sound that will then become the sound of pop music in the 1980s. As the 80s come in, he can't really cope with it, because the whole thing is that now you got drum machines, and the drum machines undo Stevie Wonder for me. There's some good stuff there. But in the 70s, when it was all about him in the studio playing everything, with his incredible songs, his incredible vocals, the twists and turns of his songwriting, he's absolutely sublime. Now, the thing I love about Stevie Wonder is his lyrics are brilliant, but he never strays into the pretentious for me. He says it like it is, and it's profound and it's interesting. I mean, Songs in the Key of Life, incredible. The one that follows up, The Secret Life of Plants, is a prog album, and it's about the most bizarre thing you've ever heard in your life. But again, I love that album. I couldn't put that on this list. Stevie Wonder can make a great double album. Now, I believe when this album came out, it was more than a double album, wasn't it? Because you had that little EP with it as well, We had 3 Day Sucker on and all that bit. Oh, the man's brilliant. This album is better. I'm sorry, Jimi. Jimi Hendrix is a genius, but Electric Ladyland is too full of stone psychedelia indulgence. Only a little bit, and we love it. In 1968, when that album was made, we love it. We excuse Jimi for doing that. He can do it, no problem. But Songs in the Key of Life, there is not one wasted note on this album. I think I'm right, and my objectivity's kicked in. I think what you could do is swap Bitches Brew and You Are What You Is and actually put, I think Electric Ladyland should be at 3. So I've changed this mid-go. So I'm going to run through it now at the end so you know where we're at. So number 10, I got Blood Sugar Sex Magic. Number 9, I got Sign of the Times. Number 8, I got Sing to God by Cardiacs. Number 7, I've got Focus 3. Number 6, I've got War of the Worlds, Jeff Wayne. Number 5, I've got You Are What You Is by Zappa. This is better, this is. But War of the Worlds should be above Zappa, isn't it? So number 6, I've got You Are What You Is. Number 5, I've got War of the Worlds. Number 4, I've got Bitches Brew. Number 3, I have Electric Ladyland. Number 2, I have The White Album. Number 1, I have Songs in the Key of Life. These are hard to do, right? I know it looks like I'm making everything up. I make the talking up, but the amount of work, I sit there and I'm listening to the albums, and I'm cross-checking, I'm reading about them on Wikipedia, and I'm trying to get a feel for them. Because it's hard to imagine, you're trying to imagine Electric Ladyland here, and you go, well, that's that amount of goodness. And how does it compare to, like, Bitches Brew? And if I'm putting those two against each other, I mean, if I had to pick one of those albums, it'd be Bitches Brew for me. If I'm going to talk about influence on me, it would be Bitches Brew. But I know in the grand scheme of things, in normal culture, Hendrix albums more, and you have to juggle with all these things. It's very interesting when you're trying to do this. So I've got to the end of the video. I said at the end that we would discuss it. It's been discussed. Is there anything else we need to cover now? Have we covered it all today, do you think? Was that okay? That was interesting, that was, wasn't it? There's some brilliant albums there, without a doubt. Really are. What pulls all these together? I tell you, it's the funk. Right, it's because they groove. Nobody wants... I mean, I could have put a billion Tangerine Dream albums on. How can they go wrong? It's all just drones anyway. It's the funk. It's the fact that they groove. It's the fact you can stick them on and they keep you going. They keep you going. That's what I want from a double album. I want a lot of the visceral. That's what I want from a double album. I don't want it all to be intellectual. And when you go towards a double album, there's a tendency to think, oh, we're writing the epic now. It's the Bible. It's our Bible. You become like a god when you try and make a double album. And it becomes all pompous. And the antidote to that is bloody viscerality. This is why live albums have to be a double album. Because when you go for a live album, what you're getting is the guts and the raw beauty of whatever band it's in. That you're into, sorry. And this is why live albums have to be like they are, because they're going to track through that live gig with all the sweat and the dark. The viscerality is in there. It's viscerality and music that keeps you going. You know, people will go out and they'll dance all night, but they're not going to go and sit and listen to the most intense abstract music for 3 or 4 hours. It's going to do your head in. Sing to God is the dot in this bit of the yin and the yang. That's the yang to this, because Sing to God is too much. It does wear you out. But for me, that's part of the artistic statement. Because with Sing to God, it's like as though you are Icarus going too close to the sun and it melts your wings. Because there's something on that it taps into something. It's like a nuclear reactor. It's like the stuff that's in the center of that, and so it's burning hot. It's Tim Smith's great statement of intent. It's like the holy grail of Cardiacs for me. It's not. I wouldn't even say it's their best album because it's impossible to say it. But in terms of intensity, you know, in the production and the sequences of the songs and what happens on that album, it's just bloody something else. What a great set of albums. I am quite proud of that. It's because just putting that double album thing it's narrowed it down a little bit. So we're at the end of the video. You know how I'm going to celebrate this? I'm going to celebrate it with a biscuit. Now, You know, many years ago now, I made my classic top 10 biscuits. And at number 1, I had put the chocolate biscuit. Now, I have got here, as you can see, I've got an actual McVitie's chocolate biscuit, which I would have put at number 1. And to prove that this isn't just silliness, I do live by these things. I've gone and bought some biscuits. And I've done the thing I always do. I've spent like 40p on a maxi pack of custard creams. I'll show you them. This is what I went out and did today. So these are like emergency biscuits. I got myself this jar here and I put loads of custard creams. That's for emergency use. You can have one. If you wanted one, you could have one. But there is chocolate biscuits to have, so you're not going to want the custard cream. But in the future, I turn up and I go, oh, God, I'm going to have a cup of coffee. I need a couple of biscuits. And custard creams will work for that. That's brilliant. And I like the aesthetic quality of that as well. It's great, isn't it? It looks really nice, the more the what's in there. Oh, that's really, really good. And then I've got some chocolate biscuits here. Now, they don't have a jar because they ain't going to be here for long, are they? I'll go and stick this back over there. I want to keep it all neat. Because in my studio, I have created... I've now got... Oh, God, I've stepped on something. I've now created... I'll show it you. Why are we even doing this? I'll show it you. At the end of the video, it's a big treat to go through that boring thing of bloody talking about double amps. This here, if I put this down here, this is my coffee station that I brought in. What do you think to that? I've got a chair here. And I can sit on the chair and finish my video in a different place. I know the light is not... I've got a light here. Let's bring the light in. So we're going to finish off here by my coffee station, by my lovely little thing that Steve Gould gave me, the great Steve Gould. My little coffee machine, got that going. Coffee, mate, you've got no milk because I haven't got a fridge. I've got emergency pot noodle. I got some tea bags, Earl Grey, of course. And then we've got the coffee things, we've got some biscuits. I've got brown sugar in the background. Can you see that? Oh, it's brilliant, isn't it? Now, I could live here, and that's the whole point. You know, once an Englishman's got a coffee and tea making station with some emergency, custard creams and some chocolate biscuits, so you can survive like that for at least 4 days. So, I'm sorted, really. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did like it, if I put the light down, I puffed myself out doing that. If you liked it, then you like it. If you want to see some more, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go through it all. I've had enough of all that. You know, I've got to start saying the subscription thing at the beginning. All that really counts is the subscriptions. It would be lovely if you put some money in my PayPal tip jar, but I don't think me saying it actually makes it happen. And it'd be lovely for you to become a patron. But really, what I want my career in music. I know it's sad, but I want the summation of it to be when I hit 100,000 subscribers. Once I've done that, I'll think, bloody hell, I never had a hit record, but I did get to 100,000 subscribers. And that's quite impressive, that is. It's like having a minor hit, which is what I wanted before. Never wanted a number 1. Number 40 in the charts would have done it for me. That's like 100,000. If I get a million, that's like number 1, isn't it? Everybody wants a million. I'm never going to get a million doing this nonsense, am I? I need to start doing some stunts or what else, talking about bloody what makes, I don't know, Bon Jovi song great for normal people. Can't take the jazz fusion. Can you even hear me over there? Because I'm quite far away, aren't I? We're done, aren't we? Did you? I've got OCD, you see. I take the mickey out of these sort of prog anal retentive types, but I'm like that too. And the only reason I brought you over here is because I like my videos to be exactly an hour long, and I can't. I'm now talking. We've got a couple of minutes to go yet. But I would like it to be not smack on the hour. I would like it to be smack on the hour. But it's hard to do that because I might put some titles on. It's very hard to do that. But we're into the last minute now. And so I'm not going to go till the minute's up. I'm just going to sit here and you can just wander at my... Yeah, you want to see what it's like outside? Come on. Have a look around the studio. That's the messy bit. Don't look at that. And here is the outside. It's a lovely day today. It's a lovely day. And we're down to the last half a minute now right now is half a minute. And so very soon, see, these people in these cars, they don't realise these cars are going to be on YouTube. And this could be quite a big video. It could be seen by tens of thousands of people, these cars. And they'll never know, will they? They'll never know. I think that's quite interesting. I'm trying to keep it so they can't see the number plates. We're down to the last 10 seconds. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.